guest is Anne Hollander, who's an art historian. Her specialty is clothing, of all things. Her most recent book current book is called Sex and Suits. It's published by Knopf. Now, we don't see much sex on CNN. We do see a lot of suits, but we rarely talk about suits. So that's what we're going to do for a few minutes today. Now, Anne, I can't help noticing, and others may have noticed, that while your book is called Sex and Suits, the man on the cover is not wearing a suit. Now, how do you justify this blatant act of salesmanship?
Well, the man on the cover is not wearing a suit, but he's wearing the costume of perfect nudity. It's my theory that the modern suit, such as you all wear, is a kind of abstraction of the perfect nude of classical antiquity, which was revived at about the same time that suits were invented to expound a new ideal of masculine perfection, which it still maintains.
That was about...
That was at the end of the 18th century.
A couple hundred years ago.
Couple hundred years ago.
All right, well now, to you, a suit may represent masculine perfection. To many men, I must say myself included, it represents enormous inconvenience. Every day I have to go to work, I put on this thing with all these pieces, and I have to tie my tie and everything, and it has to match. And it would never occur to me on my day off to bother with that sort of thing. So I ask myself, why do I have to bother?
Well,
it strikes me as an extremely uncomfortable, expensive, complicated way to dress.
It's it's certainly expensive, but I don't think it probably really is all that uncomfortable. It's made uncomfortable by being a necessary costume for work. Everybody hates work clothes if it means servitude and constraint in that sense. I have to wear this, you say. But of course, in itself, the suit is a marvel. My view has always been that the suit itself is a triumph of comfort and beauty and ease all at the same time, while remaining what you might call decorous and orderly.
Now explain why
elegant.
A little bit. You can use this particular suit as a model if you wish.
Well, you notice that the
just don't ask me to stand up because I'm strapped in.
I promise. But it does have a way of forming a loose envelope for the body, which at the same which is both padded and not padded. You'll see. It's got nice shoulders that are better than your shoulders. Excuse me, but I mean they probably are.
I assure you they are.
And but then soon after that, there is no padding below that. It has no padding below that on the arm, and your own arm can show through. You can bend, and it makes lovely folds. And then as soon as you straighten it out, the folds go away. You stand up, and the suit lies around you in an orderly fashion, keeping all your secrets, but at the same time suggesting that you have a beautiful, well-proportioned body under there.
Suggesting quite falsely. That's the goal.
Well, no,
of the
it
suit.
makes the suggestion without suggesting falsity, you see.
It doesn't suggest falsity, but...
You see,
so the idea, just to make sure I understand this, the idea of the suit is that it makes the average American lumpen male look like a Greek god.
Yes, or lumpen average American or European or anything. And originally, of course, English, because it was the English tailors that invented this wonderful scheme. Yes, it makes you look like a Greek god, but without exposing your skin like the fellow on the front of the book. It just makes that suggestion, while also, of course, suggesting decorum and a kind of harmonious self-possession, which is very sexy, in my opinion.
Now we're going to have a little slideshow today. Give us a little. You're going to
well, I was just going to say that
where the suit came from.
You can consider yourself fortunate that you are not dressing like this, which is perhaps more of suggests that the discomfort quotient at one time was quite a lot higher than what it is now.
And what time
was that? For elegant costume. This is a 16th century gentleman time of Shakespeare, late 16th century.
So the typical businessman of those days had to get up in that get-up every day?
Yes, and it was padded from top to toe, or rather from sometimes all the way down into these tights also to keep the legs in their proper form. But these things were extremely sumptuous, but also extremely constricting.
Now, to the modern viewer, that kind of get-up denotes femininity, frankly, effeminateness. He's wearing jewelry, he's got those tights, he's got this thing. Yet that's not the way it appeared to the men of that time. This man considered himself quite manly, right?
Oh, yes. The whole idea. The suit was invented at about the same time back at the end of the 18th century, at the same time that it became not only proper for men to wear simple abstract shapes, but to give up looking fancy, decorated, and full of fanciful adornments of any kind whatsoever. And all of these things were taken over by the female sex. So that women got the job of expressing not only fantasy, but erotic fantasy and sort of unconscious elements in life, natural forces and so on. Men were meant to express reason and good sense in their costume. And this was something that had only happened more or less at that time.
Show us a picture of that.
Now, for example, you have, this begins in the end of the 18th century with this picture, already starting by 1778, where the man is extremely modestly shaped in the sense of how much room he takes up, and the lady takes up twice as much room as he does. This was not so, for example, back in the Middle Ages, when men and women took up about the same amount of room.
And the men were wearing these draped,
and so were the women.
Drapery.
Same kind of drapery, that's right.
So the idea that men and women dressed fundamentally differently is a recent,
yes,
relatively recent idea.
Well, it's relatively recent. It goes with fashion, which starts up in sort of like the 14th and 15th centuries, when masculine and feminine elements get emphasized in dress and keep changing.
What do you mean by fashion? Starting
I mean the desire for dress to keep altering its basic looks. Keep, in that sense, every year, keep altering the way it looks so that a constant continuum of formal change is set in motion that never resolves.
So it's been basically 500 years that people have had the idea that they want to change their clothes every now and then. I don't mean
change the way their clothes look all the time in a kind of continuous drama that has a trajectory that never stops, something that keeps moving and constantly is playing against its previous way of looking.
Okay, so
that's fashion.
Very briefly, how do we get from that picture to what we would recognize as the modern business suit?
Well, now, all these pictures are all before the end of the 18th century. At the end of the 18th century, you start with this idea that classical form, and especially the form of the classical body, is somehow the most natural. Here's a neoclassic drawing of a classical figure.
This is the same period that architecture rediscovered the Greek and Roman models. That's why the Capitol, the U.S. Capitol, looks the way it does,
yes,
and so on and so forth.
But in particular, not just the classical elements, which had been there all along, but the simplified, basic classical elements, the most simple, unadorned classical elements, without a whole lot of extra little leaves and so on, which had been there for a couple of centuries. And all that was stripped away, and the basic classical elements were rediscovered.
Where the suit came from.
And the basic classical elements of the body were considered to be the best.
There's that guy in that birthday suit again.
And here is the kind of thing they invented to dress him. Tailored costumes in wool and in cotton and in leather, simple, natural fabrics that were more or less what was worn in the English countryside by aristocrats.
That was the model of the British aristocrat. That's Stubbs, the guy who always paints the pictures of the dogs.
Exactly. And the dog and the man have got a wonderful affinity with one another. They both have nice, neat, natural coats on.
So when is this?
Blend. This is the 1770s. In England, you see, when in France they're looking like that. In England, they've already started looking like this.
Okay, we got to move a little faster.
So we copy all that in England and in France, and fashion generally copies all that, again borrowing from the revolutionary costume in France, which is what makes everybody think that this is a brand new, marvelous revolutionary style.
Okay, we're going to have to continue on this point when we come back from our break, but I just want to point out that that is a picture from the French Revolution.
Yes.
And we're going to explain why the suit was not always a snob item. It used to be an image of the working class. We're talking to Anne Hollander, author of the book Sex and Suits. And when we last left our hero, the business suit, it was around the time of the French Revolution. And you were explaining how, put that sans-culotte guy back up again.
Oh, yes. Well, he has, you can see what he has. He has a coat, a waistcoat, and trousers.
And he's an image of the revolution, of the working class.
That's because people are wearing knee breeches and embroidered coats and lace ruffles that are in the upper class at this point. And he is wearing workaday uniform. I want to tell you that this picture is actually the picture of an actor dressed as a sans-culotte.
Naturally.
So it's an absolutely essential revolutionary look. So that's one of the elements that started it. But again, we have this tailored male here that starts off looking like Beau Brummel at the beginning of the 19th century, after the revolution, after these ideas are assimilated, and what you want is something natural and basic and honest looking, but also a fairly naked looking.
Now you better explain that, because
you see, there he is in the 1830s. The woman, in a sense, the man looks sexier than the lady. She is all covered with ruffles, but he shows off his form and his tailored form. It has shaped him to look marvelous, and it also, in this case, exposes him rather a lot. But that's how the 19th century starts. Nevertheless, he is in simple shapes. She is in a lot of fussy frills. This is the idea about what women should be like. And of course, the suit has various aspects during the 19th century, being the costume of masculine reason and power. And but also here, for example, is here is Ruskin, the art historian and critic, out among the rocks, dressed in a suit, looking like dressed in something that makes order in nature.
Nothing like you'd see in an L.L. Bean catalog today for being
exactly.
out among nature.
Similarly, Caspar Friedrich's Traveler Above the Sea of Clouds, also from the beginning of the 19th century, where he's climbed up among the rocks in his suit, as if it were the most natural thing to be wearing,
so
to face nature.
Where did this idea come from, therefore, that the suit was for businessmen, for politicians?
Well, of course it is, and it's very beautiful, and it sort of emphasizes the stature of the man because it has that simplicity, that abstractness, that way of articulating the body, forming an envelope around it without emphasizing any of it unduly. And it has a matte texture and a simple way of fitting that suggests a natural covering, like an animal's covering, even though it is very carefully cut and sewn to fit rather neatly.
We better get the story into the 20th century.
All right,
now,
that's so much as for that. In the 20th century, the suit, of course, continues in exactly the same style, but modified, so that when we get to where you are, here's something from the 1930s.
That's beginning to look familiar. Now, in England, the business suit is sometimes referred to as the lounge suit, which I don't associate a suit with lounging around, but that
these
does
things
reflect.
I was showing you, these things, for example, that Lincoln is wearing, that is formal costume,
right.
And you go to the office in that. What we now think of as formal costume, such as you have on, was a lounge suit, a thing like this which no one wore to the office. You only wore it sitting around.
What'd you wear to the office, a morning
Frock
coat or
coat
something?
or morning coat, still, certainly morning coat, even at this time.
Well, this brings us quickly to the future. Does that mean that essentially dresses are getting more and more casual year by year?
Well,
and that what used to this used to be a lounge suit, used to be something to relax with. Now it's the formal thing. You point out that you go to restaurants now and you see the waiters in dinner jackets and the customers in sweatshirts.
that's right. And
that
just as in the middle of the 19th century, you saw the diners in suits and the waiters in footmen's costumes from the 18th century.
So they're always a little bit behind.
There is a gradual shift over in men's costumes, so that what was formal becomes, what was informal becomes formal. And this happened all along. And this means that what I had in mind as a possible prediction for suits would be that suits, way in the future, might be worn by waiters of both sexes, you understand. Waiters and waitresses would wear suits. Men and women at the party would wear all sorts of leisure wear, complete with beads and feathers. But on the Senate floor and in the boardroom and in the courtroom, everyone would wear a nice, neat zipper jacket of the sort that's now considered leisure wear.
Well, I actually went to a store in Seattle a couple months ago that specializes in casual office wear. It's for offices where you don't have to wear a suit. It's aimed at Microsoft, obviously, and places
Sure.
like that out in the Pacific Northwest.
Yes.
Is that the trend of the future? I sure hope so. But
Well, if you hope so hard enough, and enough of you hope so, it will be. That's another thing about all this, which is that you notice how you talk against suits now, where the suit itself is no different from this same suit that everybody was wearing. Here's a couple of guys. This is one of my favorite pictures. A couple of guys in the bus terminal, 1948, just sitting around in their suits. They're not going anywhere to the office or the courtroom. They're just wearing their clothes.
and that was regarded the way you would regard putting on a sweatshirt and your
That's
track
just
shoes
anything.
today.
And it looks mighty comfortable to me. At that date, nobody thought it was uncomfortable.
You would regret that. You think suits are sexy.
I do, and I know they're sexy. And one of the reasons I know they're sexy is that they've stuck around all this length of time. And people like what works, you know, and that's why suits are still here,
Right.
because they're perfect. They do all this work at the same time.
I asked a friend of mine at a Christmas dinner, I said I was going to interview you this week, and I asked her whether she thought suits were sexy, and she said she thought they were, and I asked her why, and she said it's because they remind you of Daddy.
Well, there is that. There is that, as I say. Power and pleasure, both together. Daddy is your sexiest first man, of course.
On that note, we'll take another break, and we'll be back. We're talking about the history of the business suit with Anne Hollander, but we've left women out of the picture. How do they fit in?
Well, for many centuries, or for quite a long time, women didn't fit in and lived on a different planet and wore clothes that looked entirely different from anything resembling business suits. And I showed one picture of a woman wearing nothing but ruffles and the man in his beautiful tailoring, which of course engendered the idea that for women, that what they really needed was to be able to wear that stuff. And if women could wear tailored, simple garments like men, their world would change and everything would be much better for them. And women conceived that notion that they had to get out of the skirts, out of the corsets, and out of everything of that kind. So we have early 20th century efforts to imitate men completely, which were, of course, electrifying at the time. Here's Marlene Dietrich in the 30s. And only at the time, of course, able to do it for herself and for publicity, but not
But do you think women were misleading themselves? Aren't women better off now that they can wear these wonderful suits you've been touting for the past half hour?
Yes, they are, in the sense that suits are marvelous, and it was a great idea for women to modernize. Women have always been conservative. Women have always used the same techniques that they always used. Exposure, low necks, lots of jewelry, and all this frizzy hair and so on that both sexes used to use. Women kept it up long after men modernized and became interested in simplicity and elegance based on abstract, simple, harmonious shapes.
And
women finally got the idea.
And is
now
it
they have
decadent for us to be sitting here talking about fashion when there are problems with the world? The contract with America is coming up for a vote next month and that sort of stuff. How do you...
Ooh, yes, deliciously decadent. I do think that fashion has come in for a great deal more serious consideration lately because we have taken all this sort of manifestation more seriously lately. The whole idea that appearances are of utmost importance has been acknowledged recently, within the last 10 years, even within the last 5 years more.
And is fashion decadent because it's dishonest? It's people covering themselves up, pretending to be something they aren't? Me pretending to be a Greek god by wearing a business suit, for example?
No, it isn't decadent at all. I mean, in my view, it isn't decadent. It's very serious. It's part of the general constant popular art that dress has become. Fashion has made that possible for us all to dress ourselves, to form images out of our own looks that can mirror what we wish to express, how we feel, where our place goes.
You're an artist every morning when you stare into your closet and decide what to wear.
Yes. How do I feel? How is it going to look? Will I best go over? And so on, even if it's just your tie that you choose.
We're out of time. Thanks very much, Anne Hollander. Thank you for watching. Happy New Year, and join us next month, last Saturday of the month, for Heads Up.